Helo a croeso I Brifysgol Cymru y Drindod Dewi Sant. Dyn ni yma ar campws Lampeter heddi, and welcome to the University of Wales Trinity St David. So we're here at our Lampeter campus today, and you can see the fantastic St David's building just as our backdrop. So this week marks the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, and we've got some very exciting plans here on the Lampeter campus. So I'm joined with Jeremy Smith, the Dean of Humanities and Performing Arts. So Jeremy, what is happening this week?
Right, well we have a week of events. Varied events covering a range of different aspects of the Russian Revolution. We start with a big set-piece lecture today by an outside speaker from Cardiff who is making a comparison of Bolshevism and Maoism. Tomorrow we then move on to a screening of Battleship Potemkin, which is a very famous Eisenstein film, filmed in 1925, but reflecting on the events back around the Russian Revolution. And then on Wednesday we have a whole series of different workshops which cover a broad range of different aspects of the Russian Revolution. Brilliant.
So Lampeter is a stunning campus, but it's quite far away from the 1917 Russia, isn't it? So why are the events held here on Lampeter?
I think that's a very good point. And I think the reason I would give why we're doing the Russian revolutions is the way we approach the humanities here in Lampeter, and indeed the way we approach our teaching, which is very interdisciplinary, very multidimensional. We approach the same subject from a variety of different directions. So, for example, in the workshops on Wednesday, we approach the Russian Revolution from the perspective of ancient Greece, and we have parallels drawn between ancient Greece and 1917 Petrograd. We approach it from a creative writing perspective, and have a lecturer talking about art and literature during the Russian Revolution. We approach it from a philosophical direction and an anthropological direction, where we have tutors talking about the nature of revolution. And we approach it from a theological perspective, where we talk about the religious underpinnings to this phase of revolutionary activity. And of course, we have historians who approach it from a contextual way of understanding historical events. So we have historians looking at events before it, and of course there were revolutions and revolutionary activity before 1917, particularly in Dublin, Easter Rising of 1916. And then we have revolutionary activity afterwards in 1918 in Germany and Berlin. So I think why Lampeter? It's rooted in the very unique way we teach humanities and approach humanities in general, which is this broad range of interdisciplinary underpinning. And that's great for students. Students really enjoy approaching their subject from a variety of different directions. And that really, I think, is what makes Lampeter and the faculty very unique indeed.
It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we have got a clip now for you to really see why Lampeter is so special, and this is the Lampeter difference.
Imagine a university set in the beautiful Welsh hills, with the amenities of a market town just a stone's throw away. A university far removed from all the pressures of urban living, where within minutes you might be walking in the Cambrian mountains or surfing along the Cardigan coast. Imagine a university where everybody knew your name, where you counted as an individual, where your voice matters, where you have the freedom to be yourself, and where you are part of a close, friendly community. Imagine a setting where a long academic tradition, stretching back 200 years, meets 21st century teaching technologies. Where an Oxbridge quad nestles side by side with modern, iconic buildings, and where studies are pursued in harmony with an historic campus environment. Imagine a university that takes your needs seriously, where you receive the support and encouragement you need, and where staff genuinely care about you and your academic progress. Imagine a university where you'll be taught in small groups, where you're on first-name terms with lecturers, where staff and students work collaboratively, sharing ideas and opinions, in a learning environment that is based on respect, cooperation and a common love of subject. Don't just imagine this, come and join it. Come and pursue your love of subject, your love of the humanities, in a place, an atmosphere that is utterly unique. If you think you have chosen your university, then you're not thinking. Come and experience Lampeter at the University of Wales, Trinity, St David, and then decide.
So we're joined now by Caris, who is a third-year student, a history student here on the Lampeter campus. So why did you choose UWTSD Lampeter, Caris?
I think it was the friendly atmosphere of the campus. It's just a nice community feel to it, which made me feel really at home. And also the courses, I'm able to study medieval and modern history alongside each other, which I think works really well.
Brilliant. And is there a particular module that you've really enjoyed?
I think medieval Britain, maybe. It's rather than looking at each of the kings individually, it sort of covers the whole period, and so I thought that was good to bring together all the changes that are happening.
Okay, brilliant. And there are lots of events planned this week. Is there something in particular you're really looking forward to?
I think there's an event comparing the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the Irish Rebellion of 1916, and I really like Irish history, so I'll be interested to go to that.
Brilliant. And there might be lots of people listening today who are thinking, oh, I'd love to go to some of the events. How do they get involved?
Just come along, and there's all different events at different times, workshops, talks. Just come along and
brilliant. And they're
listen.
all here, aren't they, on the University of Wales,
campus.
St David Lampeter. Okay, brilliant. So I know that you're going to be speaking with one of your tutors later on today, Alexander Scott, and he will be going over why the events are being held and how, again, people can get involved.
Yeah.
So thank you, Caris.
Thank you.
I love studying archaeology, mainly because it gives you access to a society, a culture, a time that we've kind of lost track with in the 21st century.
It's finding the forgotten, which is what really appeals to me.
In archaeology, you actually you go out and you find it, and then you get to piece together history, and I think that's the most amazing thing in the world.
With the excavation, there's the first most enjoyable part is obviously the actual digging out the ground and finding artefacts that haven't been seen in hundreds or thousands of years.
And the interesting thing is you're piecing together history. You're taking the soil samples and looking what type of soils they are and trying to work out why they're like that. It's a bit like detective work. It's quite fun.
I like the lecturers here, mainly because they're really passionate, and they're passionate about you being passionate. So what's really great is when you turn up, any idea is accepted, and they're happy to talk about it at any point. They'll have a coffee with you if that's what you want to do, or you'll talk in their office.
The lecturers will come over, look at what we're doing, show us you can do it this way rather than doing it that way, and just very helpful.
Archaeology is a special subject. I mean, in no other subject you actually get to go out and find objects and find history.
I like archaeology.
Hi, welcome back. That was a really good video we just saw from the archaeology department. I'm now here with my lecturer, Dr. Alexander Scott. So, Alex, can you tell us what's going on campus this week?
Yeah, so I'm one of the organisers of the set of events that we're hosting here on Lampeter campus, entitled Lenin's on Sale Again, 100 Years of the Russian Revolution. We've decided to put on an event to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the October Revolution in Russia. And we're going to be hosting special lectures, film screenings and an interdisciplinary workshop.
Okay, that sounds good. Is there any more information about the idea for the event, where it came from?
So the idea for the event snowballed really from an initial point of inspiration that one of my colleagues, Andy Bevan, had. and he was doing some reading about how World War I was covered in Welsh newspapers, and he realised that the Russian Revolution, or the series of revolutions in Russia in 1917, were covered in a lot of detail in local Welsh newspapers, surprising amount of detail. And from this, Andy was able to put an exhibition together, which is currently taking place at UWTSD Lampeter Library. And Andy wanted to sort of use that as a jumping off point for other events. And I, as a modern historian, was particularly taken with this. The Russian Revolution is such an important moment in modern history that it seemed like we ought to do something to coincide with its anniversary. And once I got talking to colleagues, we noted that there was a lot of expertise that sort of links up to the Russian Revolution. And across the different disciplines that we have here on Lampeter campus, all of my colleagues are really enthusiastic and wanted to contribute. And that's the end result is the interdisciplinary workshop we're hosting on Wednesday.
That's really interesting. It's interesting how all the connections to different topics will tie in. What's going on today and tomorrow then as part of this event?
So today we're hosting a special lecture in the Old Hall at 5:15, and this is going to be a lecture on the relationship between the Russian and Chinese revolutions, entitled Bolshevism and Maoism in the Age of Revolution. And this lecture is given by Professor Gregor Benton of Cardiff University. Gregor Benton is one of the most esteemed Anglophonic historians of Chinese history. I know his work on the history of the Chinese community in Britain, which is something he's written about quite extensively. I own books by him, so I'm really enthusiastic that he's here today.
Okay, and what will be taking place on Wednesday?
So Wednesday, as I've already mentioned, is sort of the main meat of this series of events that we're hosting. And it's I've entitled it an interdisciplinary workshop. And this will be a series of sessions delivered by academic members of staff, exploring the Russian Revolution from a variety of different perspectives, exploring the Russian Revolution in relation to people's particular disciplinary expertise. So, for example, we start off with a poetry reading by one of our members of creative writing staff. We're thinking about the impact of the Russian Revolution on art, on cinema, but also on the impact in other fields that perhaps are less expected. So my colleague Kyle Eriksson is given a paper on how the Russian Revolution influenced the development of understandings of ancient Athens and ancient Greece more generally, and ancient Rome, because scholars who had been in Russia, in Imperial Russia prior to the revolution, emigrated overseas, and their scholarship became really important in influencing how the ancient past was interpreted. So that's one example. We've got philosophers talking. So my colleague David Morgans is talking about why Lenin wasn't a Marxist.
Yeah.
Don't quite know how he's going to make that conclusion. And my colleague Nick Campion is going to be talking about how Lenin's ideas can be related to George W. Bush's foreign policy.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you tell me more about how the event will connect with teaching at Lampeter and the interactions between the two?
So I suppose the first thing to stress is that it connects in the sense that we are already interdisciplinary campus here, that we have people like myself who specialise in modern history, we have people who specialise in medieval and ancient history, but we have a variety of other subjects which are delivered here on Lampeter campus. So the fact that we have anthropologists, philosophers, creative writing, scholars speaking at our event on Wednesday reflects the interdisciplinary character of the campus as a whole. More specifically, I can say that there are direct ties between the events that are taking place and my teaching as a modern historian. So at level 4, the main introduction to history module that I deliver is subtitled Ages of Revolutions and Extremes. So we talk about the Russian Revolution as an example of a series of really important revolutions that shaped the modern world, including the American, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. Then at level 5, I also teach, as you mentioned earlier on, a module that discusses representations of war in popular culture. And within that, I'm going to, this year, include the Russian Revolution as an example, particularly, again, the influence of the Russian Revolution on the development of Soviet cinema. I also teach on the American history, as you mentioned earlier on, and that's quite important because the Cold War of the late 20th century really shapes US history throughout the second part of the 20th century. So that's another example of how it's influential the Russian Revolution was and how it crops up in a lot of what we do here.
Okay. Why do you think that revolutions are so important? What is it about them that make them such an interesting topic?
Well, I think they have intrinsic interest, but they have particular interest for historians. As I've explained, we have a whole range of interdisciplinary interests on campus, and we have historians here who focus on different chronological locales, ancient, medieval, modern, etc. But I think if you're trying to come up with one unifying feature that all of these things share, it would be that as historians, we're interested in the relationship of continuity and change. So continuity and change are really important concepts for historians, irrespective of what time period you're interested in. So revolutions are particularly interesting to historians because they throw continuity and change into stark relief. Almost by definition, the history of revolutions changes the prior status quo. They are upturning of the present order and creating something new, or at least in principle they are. So in a sense, for historians, we're interested in revolutions because they make us think about continuity and change in different ways. We think, well, what was changed by the Russian Revolution and what remained the same in post-revolutionary society?
Are there any specific examples other than the Russian Revolution of revolutions and the changes that they had?
Okay, so for instance, in my level 4 module, I was speaking about earlier ages of revolutions and extremes. Two of the revolutions that we talk about specifically there are the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution. And I think both of these are events that really give a good sense of how revolutions transform history. They're sort of a motor of history. And also how they change how time and history is understood. And I can come up with some precise examples for that. So one of the many changes engendered by the French Revolution, alongside the transformation of the political status quo in France, was the institution of a new calendar. So a new set of months, a new way of designating what the days of the week were. But perhaps most specifically, and relating to your question, would be the decision to declare the birth of the Republic as year one.
Yeah.
So that's sort of saying that we have, not only is the French Revolution an important moment in history, it's kind of the birth of history at least according to the rhetoric of French revolutionaries. And we could say something similar about the Industrial Revolution, that in the sense that it also has an impact on how time is conceptualized. Specifically, I'm thinking of the impact of the railway, the advent of the railway in the UK. The introduction of the railway necessitated standardized time. It was necessary to have a timetable that railway companies could adhere to across the nation.
Yeah.
So that Lampeter had the same time as Swansea or Carmarthen, so that trains could meet the time. And that had never existed before. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, prior to the advent of the railway in the mid-19th century, different towns and cities had their own time, judged by the movement of the sun and the changing of the seasons. So in effect, today, in the 21st century, we still live with the temporality that was created by the Industrial Revolution, we still live on railway time, which was a product of that period.
It's fascinating the changes that happen through revolution that you sort of ignore, and time is one of them.
Yeah.
Definitely. Are there any limitations or difficulties with studying revolutions?
Well, I suppose the big thing is to not overemphasize how much is transformed by revolutions. So even though it's what we're perhaps really interested in, historians, there's a danger or risk in assuming that everything was completely transformed out of all recognition by a revolution. Whereas I think once you start studying any of the revolutions I've spoken about, you'll find that that perhaps isn't necessarily the case. So it wasn't the case in the Industrial Revolution that the pre-industrial society was overhauled completely. Indeed, the Industrial Revolution was quite an incremental process of change over time that was quite patchy and felt differently in different locations. So the important thing is to not sort of assume that the Industrial Revolution or the French Revolution did create a year one, did create a new period of history, but that's more how they were conceived or conceptualized. Another thing I think that's important to bear in mind is that some of the revolutionary ideas of previous eras end up becoming quite commonplace. So some of the radical ideas of French revolutionaries we perhaps just take as given today. Furthermore, you might say that in some cases revolutions become quite sanitized, become commodified, lose their original impetus and what made them revolutionary in the first place. So you might think of the descent of the French Revolution into the Reign of Terror and eventually the restoration of the monarchy, or you might think of the descent of the Russian Revolution into Stalinism and all its oppressions and repressions. Or you might also think of how the Russian Revolution has kind of been subsumed into popular culture now. So yesterday's revolutionary is tomorrow's kitsch. Lenin in 1917 was the great sort of devil in the eyes of the capitalist West, whereas now he's just a badge on my lapel. So I think revolutions can be quite cautionary to historians in that regard.
Okay, thanks Alex, that's great. There's lots of interesting events and really fascinating to hear your take on revolution. We'll cut to a video now showing the campus.
Hi and welcome back, and thank you very much to Alex for lots of fantastic information there about the events and the revolution itself. And Alex is one of your tutors, isn't he?
Yeah.
So what kind of lectures do you have with him?
I did a module on American history in my first year, which was really good, and then representations of war, so sort of discussing how conflict is represented in sort of popular culture and books and films and stuff like that.
And he's got a wealth of knowledge. What's his background, or what is the things he specialises in?
I think studying cities is his main topic, which is his specialty. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you've had lots of opportunities from your tutors and from events like this to extend your knowledge, but you're also a student ambassador here, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and what do you enjoy about your role as a student ambassador?
I think the open days are the highlight because you get to meet a lot of people, and there's people there who are about to make a big choice about the university, so to talk to them and try and help them out with that decision's really
Brilliant.
good.
And as you said, there's lots of students out there now filling the UCAS form in, and open days is probably one of the best things they can do at this point, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we have an open day on Lampeter campus on the 4th of November.
Yeah.
Are you working?
I'm not sure, I might be, yeah.
Brilliant. So hopefully you can come along on the 4th of November and meet Caris and students. And what's the best thing about an open day? What can they expect?
I think it's just a good taster for what the experience at the university will be. There's taster lectures and the opportunity just to get to know the campus and get to know the lecturers. So.
Brilliant. And today we covered history, and we offer a broad range of courses here on the Lampeter campus, don't we?
Yeah.
And some of your fellow student ambassadors, are they also studying various programmes?
Yeah, all different courses. I've got one friend doing archaeology, which she's really enjoying, another doing English. So all sorts.
Brilliant. And you can find out about all of them, including the programmes that we've spoken about today on our Lampeter Open Day on the 4th of November, which you can go onto our website and book on to the Lampeter Open Day, and also to see any of our other campuses as well. So diolch yn fawr I chi, hwyl am y tro, thank you very much, and have a lovely day.
My name's Lucy and I teach anthropology at the University of Wales Trinity St David on the Lampeter campus. I'm very keen on altering education.
My name is Diana Eriksson. I'm first year anthropology at UWTSD. And so as behind me, it's quite an odd scene. This is for our lecture, interact with our module, Interactions with the Environment.
Today we are sorting rubbish because over the past few weeks we've been gathering all our rubbish, so things like cardboard, paper, plastic, anything we'd be considering waste, we've been collecting and bringing it here because we're studying our relationship with materials and how we perceive things that are useful to us and are not so useful.
When I first came to our class, I noticed just how practical and how engaged you want us to be into our subject. We've been in the river, we've been playing around with blocks, we've been painting, and as you can see now, we're using our own rubbish to build something, which might be quite remarkable. It's so much different from a school or college environment. You're so much more interactive when you come to do the subject. It's really something brilliant.
I'm in a situation where I can see that the world really needs people who are active and engaged and who are capable of evoking, provoking, initiating change, doing things to make the world a better place, rather than just sitting around thinking about it, and rather than just sitting around listening to or pontificating about what other people have done.
I've never had a lecturer like Lucy, never. Like, I used to do media and that was like the most practical you'd get in lessons, but this is like, you come to class and you think, some people like dread coming to class and like, oh, I have to sit in a lecture and take notes all the time, but here it's like, no, we're going to discuss stuff, we're going to get involved, and again, like, linked to this subject, and it's how we view everything. So we have to be very practical and hands-on, because you can't view things on behind a screen, you can't view things just taking notes.
Beautiful things happen. There's something comes out of the students and they start to provoke each other and they start to think in ways that I couldn't possibly have thought of, and the whole thing opens up, blossoms even, into something completely unexplained, unthought of, unconceived, unpreconceived, and I learn then. I learn more. They learn in incredible ways. So it's a beautiful creative process that actually surprises me genuinely on a daily basis. I really love what the students do. When the students are let free in here to guide their own lessons, they're splendid. When they're told to sit down and listen, they're bored. So, you know, actually, I'm bored too. So.